Welcome. Tonight we're going to talk about cobbles, crevices, and gold traps. Hi, I'm Prospector Jess. You've joined the right place to find more gold. That's what we're here to help you with. One of the things I wanted to kind of go over is something I've talked about in the past and will in the future because it's so important. So hang on, watch this show, and find out exactly where gold is hiding in cobbles, crevices, and other gold traps. I'm going to give you some ideas and some things to look for. So welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here. So tonight we're going to talk about cobbles and all that kind of stuff. And I was curious how many of you are out there and about looking for gold. And gold traps, things like that, come in mind when you're looking for gold in rivers and things like that. I'll give you an idea of what that looks like. Something like this comes to mind. So see how that kind of captures the whole view. And we got this nice babbling brook, so to speak, full of gold traps. Okay, the question is, which ones are good? Which ones make the most sense in terms of trappability and gold finding ability? I want your comments on that pronto. So we're going to be doing a little bit more interaction tonight. I'm going to ask you for some input as we go. So let's take a look at that for a moment here. Go back to the host. So the idea is you're going to be hunting for the good stuff, this thing, okay? And you're going to be looking for enough of that to kind of fill multiple vials and give you samples galore. These things are numbered samples, so they kind of go with a prospect we've been working for a while. And the idea is you want to track those things together. One of the places you're going to be looking is a series of gold catches or gold traps. These are physical locations that have certain properties, and I'll go over that in a second, that allow gold to separate out from the flow. You know, the flow being this kind of a river moving along at full speed, pushing everything downhill, downstream, down to bedrock. And so the idea, what we're doing is we're going to kind of reverse that action and say, well, where would it capture, in flow, and what are the physics? Why would it stop? Why would gold quit running to the ocean? And the answer is, well, actually, it does it quite frequently. It will stop because of certain phenomena that go along with the fact that it's heavy. The key is gold is so dense. So when gold is that dense, you want to make sure that you're aware of how that gold interacts with the surroundings. And that's the key feature here. Once you know that interaction, then you can look at the surroundings and how they vary and determine kind of the behavior that the gold might take. Once you have that, you have a whole bunch of hypotheses, which are way better than a throwing of dart or flipping of a coin as to where to start looking for the gold, because nature's telling you, I'm hiding the gold under here. Okay, and so that's the objective, is kind of look for those places, think about what you're looking at, and then start going through it methodically. And as I said, once you go through it methodically, start sampling out samples and number them and make sure you keep track of which ones came from which area so that you can kind of figure out if there's a pay streak developing, and if so, where is it leading? Okay, because that's where the big stuff is. The problem with a lot of prospectors, amateur and expert, is they tend to get emotional about what they're doing and either bail out too soon or don't pay attention to the signals. They don't pay attention to where it's leading or not. It could be that it's telling you, move on, get out of there, you're done. There's no more gold, or at least not significant gold here. You're finding specks and you're spending years. Okay, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be finding nice little pieces that lead to chunks and chunks that lead to nuggets in that kind of order. The problem is we tend to look for the nuggets and give up when we haven't really kind of followed that process through. So what we're going to talk about tonight is those interesting and meaningful places called gold traps. What we're going to do right now is go over to the chalkboard and take a peek. So here's the deal. Water flow, in this case, is the key feature, but it's not the only one. So typically when we have a stream bed, it's going to have the underlying bedrock formations but it's also going to have some other stuff, and that's where things get interesting. The other stuff I'm going to paint in a slightly different color, something, I don't know, green, okay? And that might be that we have some protrusions coming out of this that's a different kind of bedrock, and maybe it's got some fissures in it. This would be like slate or some kind of a broken up material. Could be nice, could be chunks of granite that have just deteriorated so badly that they're all broken up. Either way, it's leaving a bunch of fractures that go in relatively deep into the surface. And so these fractures form little kind of notches for the gold to get trapped into. Now what's important here is the fractures kind of go along the surface, but they're basically connected. Usually in the case of like slate, it's all one big rock, but it's splitting, okay? And once a piece of sand or something gets down in there, ice, the thing will split open further. Same thing with granite. It'll split open when ice gets in there and wedges it. Or when a plant goes down in there and wedges it, okay? Either way, that opening is an opportunity, okay? So that's one type. Another type of trap is simply an object that's big enough that it typically doesn't get moved in a big storm, okay? Boulder will do just fine, okay? Another type of trap that we have here might be a different kind of a structure, and that is a fissure in the surface that's just a big crack, as opposed to some protruding rock material that kind of has a different texture. This thing is just a giant crack or an opening, okay? Same kind of sources usually, same opportunities. The other thing that might be a trap would simply be some kind of protruding structure, some wedge or something of other bedrock type material that gets out here and breaks the flow. And so it creates a little dam or a turn that goes real quick and a whirlpool behind it. These are all telltales that there might be something interesting there. Now, whirlpools are a case where you want to be really careful, because a whirlpool itself, if it's in full flow, could easily just stir up any gold, including big nuggets, and just spin them right out like a giant centrifuge or a washing machine. Those are not as interesting as ones that kind of create an eddy behind them and start building up and sorting sands and gravels. That starts catching my eye real fast. So the thing you want to look for in any of these traps are sands and gravels that are graded. They large to small, large to small. That grading corresponds to nugget to dust, nuggets to dust, okay? And so when you get down to little sand and silt, you're looking for gold dust. When you're out there looking at these cobbles and giant things, down underneath them, pinned someplace, could be a little patch of coarse gold or nuggets. And that's kind of the principle that we're going with here. Oh, and that's another kind of trap. It would be just simply some kind of graded pile of material that traps out of the flow. The key here is it traps out of the flow. In high flow, this stuff gets agitated but doesn't get completely destroyed or disturbed. That's why usually it's somehow connected to bedrock. Now here's the deal. There's two cases for these things. One is a trap that's sort of captured on the surface because of just sheer magnitude. Okay, you can see a few of those here. You know, just these big rocks right over here, for example. And some of these ones over here that might be attached. This one over here looks like it might be attached to bedrock, but they don't have to be. They just have to be big enough that they typically don't flow in winter. In those cases, they can start trapping gold out. Okay, here's the deal. Those types of traps are dynamic. They'll trap from one season to the next, but at some point there's going to be a flow big enough where a big old house-sized boulder just comes rolling down right out of oh, let's see, what's the name of that? I can't remember the name of the never mind, movies. Oh heck, Harrison Ford. Okay, you got it. You'll remember the boulder. Okay, rolling down the hill. Apparently he did that in the show, and they didn't really appreciate it much. He did the stunt himself, and that was like a real stunt prop that was really, really heavy to make it effectively look like a great big marble. In one trip, and they lose their star. So not a good idea. But apparently he did that and was known for kind of pushing to do that kind of stuff himself. That's just the way stars are sometimes. And so with that said, something that big could knock anything out of the stream that's there. Therefore, those things that are on the bottom that are of that kind of nature typically are temporary. They might be very long-term temporary, but they're temporary. Okay, sooner or later something's going to bump them, and so therefore they're not a fixed or permanent placer deposit. Okay, bet you didn't know that. So traps can lead to temporary deposits, or if the bedrock is involved, then almost always it's what's called a permanent deposit. The only thing that would remove it from the deposit would be you or me, a prospector, typically. Okay, there isn't anything else much. There's no fish that are going to go down in there and pull out all the cobbles and start stretching the gold out to make it come out of the crevice or anything like that. It's just not going to happen. But those are more permanent deposits, and therefore they have the prospect that if you find them, they can be very lucrative. They can also be empty if they aren't structured exactly right. So it's a bit of a shoot. The only thing you're doing here is increasing the probability of finding some serious gold. The plat